I remember the weight of that Friday afternoon like it was yesterday. The light through the office windows had that late winter quality to it, thin and golden, promising warmth without delivering. I had been checking my watch since lunch, not from impatience, but from quiet anticipation. The Super Bowl tickets were waiting in Mr. Carr's office, the tangible reward for 3 months of relentless effort. The company-wide sales contest had been announced with appropriate corporate fanfare, motivational emails, progress trackers on the break room wall, the occasional congratulatory message when someone pulled ahead. I hadn't participated for the glory. I participated because that's who I was after 15 years with Harrington Financial Partners. Reliable, consistent, present. The kind of employee who builds the foundation while others claim credit for the view from the roof. I knocked twice on his door, the sound reverberating through the emptying hallway as colleagues began their weekend exodus. My knuckles against wood, a small percussion that would mark the beginning of something I couldn't yet see. Mr. Carr looked up from his monitor, that familiar expression of mild annoyance softening into recognition. He gestured me in with a flick of his wrist, never fully removing his attention from whatever spreadsheet commanded his gaze. I stood there a moment, hands loosely clasped before me, waiting for him to acknowledge why I had come. The contest results had been announced via company-wide email that morning. Daniel Latimer, first place, 2 premium seats to the Super Bowl. A small victory in a career built on small, sustainable efforts rather than grand, visible gestures. "Oh, those tickets," he said finally, swiveling slightly in his chair to face me. A half-smile formed on his lips, the kind that never quite reaches the eyes. "Sorry, I had to reassign them. Maybe next year." The words fell between us like stones in still water, creating ripples that only I could feel. There was a moment, brief but infinite, where I simply absorbed the impact. 15 years of loyalty measured against such casual dismissal. I watched him watching me, waiting for protest or disappointment or anger. Any reaction that would justify his theft as merely a business decision. Instead, I felt a strange calm descend, like the quiet that follows a thunderclap. "Enjoy the game," I said quietly, turning to leave before he could respond. 3 simple words, offered without sarcasm or visible disappointment. Just a statement, hanging in the air as I walked away, my footsteps echoing against the marble floor of the executive corridor. The drive home that evening stretched longer than usual, though the traffic was no heavier. I took the coastal route, watching winter sunlight fracture across the bay like broken glass. 15 years at Harrington had shaped me into something both respected and overlooked, a paradox I had accepted as the cost of stability. I wasn't the one who organized happy hours or delivered dynamic presentations that made executives lean forward in their chairs. I was the one clients asked for by name when problems needed solving. I was the one who trained new hires on systems and relationships that couldn't be distilled into PowerPoint slides. I was the institutional memory, the steady hand, the backbone that allowed others to stand tall. And for the first time in my career, I had allowed myself to believe that quiet competence might be recognized. The contest wasn't random chance. It was 3 months of strategic outreach, personalized follow-ups, and midnight proposal revisions while others slept. Winning wasn't luck. It was mathematics, predictable as gravity. My house greeted me with its familiar silence that evening. Rebecca had taken the kids to her mother's for the weekend, one of our unspoken agreements after the separation. Fridays were when the silence of the house felt most pronounced, echoing with memories of family dinners and movie nights from what now seemed another lifetime. I dropped my keys on the counter, their metallic clatter jarring against the stillness. I had planned to call them tonight, to share the news, to hear my son Jake's excitement about potentially attending his first Super Bowl. At 15, he was developing the same quiet passion for the game that had marked my own adolescence. The tickets represented more than a corporate prize. They were a bridge between us, something untouched by divorce paperwork and custody schedules. Now that bridge had vanished, repurposed for Mr. Carr's networking ambitions. I opened the refrigerator, grabbed a beer, and settled onto the back deck to watch darkness claim the horizon. No call tonight. Some disappointments are better not shared. Monday arrived with the predictable chaos of monthly reporting deadlines. I moved through the morning with mechanical efficiency, responding to emails, updating projections, attending the department status meeting, where Mr. Carr presided with his customary blend of forced enthusiasm and thinly veiled impatience. He avoided direct eye contact with me throughout, though I caught him glancing in my direction during lulls in the conversation. I maintained the same professional demeanor I'd cultivated for a decade and a half. Attentive, prepared, neutral. If he was looking for resentment, he would find nothing but the same Daniel Latimer who had occupied Office 312 since the Bush administration. I returned to my desk afterward, where a notification awaited me. A message from Thomas Whitaker, CEO of Meridian Systems, our largest client and my professional responsibility for the past 7 years. Looking forward to seeing you at the game on Sunday, the message read. We can discuss the contract expansion afterward. No need for formal meetings when we have 50-yard line seats. I stared at the screen, understanding blooming slowly like a time lapse of frost forming on glass. Mr. Carr hadn't simply taken the tickets. He had leveraged them, painting himself into a picture where I had built the frame. Meridian Systems represented nearly 20% of our annual revenue. Thomas Whitaker didn't trust institutions. He trusted people. Specifically, he trusted me. 7 years of quarterly lunches, remembering his children's names, ensuring his concerns were addressed before they became problems. 7 years of relationship building that Mr. Carr now intended to hijack with my Super Bowl tickets as the vehicle. I composed a careful response, explaining that I wouldn't be attending, but that Mr. Carr would certainly address any questions about the expansion. Professional, factual, devoid of the context that would have exposed the theft. I hit send and returned to my quarterly projections, while something quiet and determined took root in my consciousness. The game arrived with the expected national fanfare. I watched from my living room, nursing a single beer, acknowledging the spectacle without fully engaging with it. Jake had chosen to spend the weekend with me rather than his mother, a small victory that partially filled the void left by Carr's theft. We ordered pizza, made amateur assessments of each play, and enjoyed the simple communion of shared focus. I didn't mention the tickets that should have put us in the stadium rather than on my worn leather couch. What purpose would it serve except to transform a pleasant Sunday into a monument to what might have been? During the third quarter, my phone buzzed with an email notification from Whitaker. Your boss seems remarkably uninformed about the Morrison integration timeline. Thought you had briefed him. I set the phone down without responding, feeling neither triumph nor vindication, just quiet acknowledgement of the inevitable. The collapse began the next morning. Whitaker's executive assistant called to schedule an urgent meeting, not with Mr. Carr, but with me. By noon, the regional director had summoned Carr to a closed-door session that lasted 2 hours. By 3, rumors circulated about raised voices from the conference room. By 5, Whitaker had formally requested that I personally oversee the contract renegotiation, bypassing the normal chain of command. I don't know what happened at that game, the regional director told me privately, but Whitaker says he's only continuing with Harrington if you're his direct contact. No intermediaries. I nodded, accepting the directive without explanation or excuse. Sometime during all this, an email arrived from Carr, subject line screaming in capital letters. Urgent. Need your help. The message rambled through panic and accusation, eventually landing on a desperate plea for me to fix the Whitaker situation. The cursor blinked at me, waiting for a response that would salvage his reputation, his authority, perhaps even his career. I considered my options carefully, measuring 15 years of professional restraint against this singular moment of potential retribution. The satisfaction of watching him squirm held its own seductive appeal, but vengeance had never been my driving force. I thought about Jake's face when I told him the tickets were gone, the quiet acceptance that mirrored my own habitual response to disappointment. I thought about the countless evenings I'd missed with him and his sister while building relationships that Carr had attempted to appropriate as easily as he'd taken those tickets. In the end, I typed 11 words. Per your prior decision, I no longer have visibility into that account. Wishing you the best. Professional. Factual. Final. Not an act of aggression, but rather a conscious withdrawal of support. The removal of the foundation he had taken for granted. I sent the email and left the office at 5:30, exactly as I had done for 15 years. The following week unfolded with a strange, suspended quality of systems in transition. Carr avoided me entirely, while upper management suddenly found reasons to engage me in conversations that stretched beyond mere pleasantries. On Thursday, the regional director's assistant scheduled a meeting for Friday afternoon, the same time slot when, just 2 weeks earlier, I had stood in Carr's office hearing that my tickets had been reassigned. The symmetry wasn't lost on me as I took the elevator to the executive floor, uncertainty and curiosity mingling in equal measure. The regional director, Patricia Holden, greeted me with unexpected warmth, offering coffee and taking the chair beside me rather than maintaining the power distance of her desk. "Daniel," she began, using my first name with a familiarity that 15 years had never warranted until now. "I'll be direct. We've had some concerning revelations about management practices in your department." She outlined what had emerged. Carr had never received authorization to reassign the contest prizes. He had fabricated email chains suggesting the decision came from above. He had misrepresented his relationship with key accounts, including Meridian Systems, on quarterly reports. The picture she painted wasn't just of a man who had stolen Super Bowl tickets. It was of a manager who had systematically claimed credit for relationships and results that existed because of my consistent, invisible labor. "We'd like to offer you a new position," she concluded after laying out the evidence. "Director of Client Relations, your own division, reporting directly to me. Full autonomy over staffing and strategy, with appropriate compensation adjustments, of course. The offer hung between us, substantial and unexpected. Not a consolation prize, but a recognition, late but real, of value that had always existed beneath the surface of performance reviews and organizational charts. I accepted with the same calm deliberation that characterized my professional identity. No dramatic declarations or demands for justice served. Just a thoughtful acknowledgement that the position aligned with my strengths and the company's needs. I asked practical questions about implementation timelines and resource allocations. I expressed appreciation for the opportunity. Throughout the conversation, Carr's name faded from prominence, becoming a footnote rather than the central character in this narrative of delayed recognition. Patricia mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that he had been placed on administrative leave pending an ethics review. We both understood the likely outcome without requiring explicit confirmation. Some exits make barely a sound, just the soft click of a door closing on an empty office, with personal effects packed discreetly after hours to avoid public witness to the departure. Spring gave way to summer, then fall, as I settled into the rhythms of my new role. My corner office featured a single personal photograph, the original contest announcement email, printed and framed, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as evidence that sometimes recognition finds its way through unexpected channels. I built my team carefully, prioritizing substance over spectacle, competence over charisma. We secured the Meridian Systems expansion in April. By June, 2 additional major accounts had shifted to our division based on Whitaker's recommendation. The annual report highlighted our contribution without fanfare, just numbers telling their own unembellished truth about value created and relationships maintained. In October, the company announced the new sales contest. Same structure, same prize, 2 premium tickets to the Super Bowl. I entered not from any need to prove something, but from a simple commitment to excellence that had defined my professional life. When the results were announced in December, the company-wide email carried a different weight than it had a year earlier. This time, when I received congratulations in the hallway or elevator, they came with genuine respect rather than the obligatory acknowledgement of a contest outcome. This time, when I knocked on Patricia's door to coordinate the logistics of claiming the prize, there was no question of reassignment or appropriation. This time, when I told Jake we would be attending the Super Bowl together, His excitement wasn't something I had to imagine through the disappointment of plans derailed. Winter sun streamed through the terminal windows as we boarded our flight west, casting long shadows behind us while illuminating the path ahead. I've thought often about that Friday afternoon a year ago, when 3 quiet words, "enjoy the game," marked both an ending and a beginning. There was no satisfaction in watching Carr's systematic dismantling in the weeks that followed. No pleasure in the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered break rooms. No vindication in the awkward explanations offered by HR representatives who couldn't quite meet my eyes while detailing what had occurred. What remained was the simple truth that sometimes justice arrives through patience rather than confrontation. Sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal isn't explosive retaliation, but the sustained demonstration of value that makes the betrayal self-defeating. Carr didn't lose his position because I orchestrated his downfall. He lost it because in attempting to appropriate the relationships I had built, he revealed their true source and his own expendability. Our seats at the stadium offered a perfect view of the field, the emerald expanse where strategic decisions unfold in real time, where preparation meets opportunity, where small advantages accumulate into victory. Jake leaned forward during crucial plays, his profile in the stadium lights revealing hints of the man he was becoming. Between quarters, we discussed game strategy and school plans with equal interest, the easy conversation of 2 people comfortable in shared space. No phones interrupted our attention. No work emergencies demanded immediate response. Just the pure presence of this moment, built on the foundation of patient persistence through disappointment. There's a particular kind of peace that comes not from winning every battle, but from recognizing which ones truly matter. Not from achieving every goal, but from understanding which ones align with your deepest values. As the final seconds counted down and celebration erupted around us, Jake turned to me with a grin that reflected more than just athletic victory. "This was worth waiting for," he said simply. I nodded, knowing he meant both the game and something larger. The quality of attention that can only exist when priorities are clear and distractions fall away. There are tickets to experiences, and then there are tickets to connections that transcend the experiences themselves. In losing one opportunity, I had gained something far more valuable: the clarity to recognize what actually matters, the patience to allow consequences to unfold naturally, and the wisdom to build success on substance rather than appearance. Some lessons arrive unexpectedly, wrapped in disappointment, but revealing deeper truths when unwrapped fully. Some victories aren't marked by dramatic confrontation, but by the quiet affirmation that your worth is no longer in question, not to others, and most importantly, not to yourself. The journey home carried none of the heaviness that had accompanied my drive along the coast a year earlier. The same bay that had reflected fractured winter light now mirrored a different quality of awareness, whole rather than broken, forward-focused rather than dwelling in what might have been. My office awaited on Monday, my team ready to implement the strategies we had developed together over months of collaborative effort. The framed contest announcement would remain on my wall, not as a reminder of injustice overcome, but as evidence that even small recognitions can catalyze transformative change when they align with deeper currents of value and purpose. There is power in patience, strength in steady persistence, and a particular kind of triumph in allowing natural consequences to manifest without interference. Some games you win through aggressive play. Others you win by recognizing when to step back and let the inherent truth of a situation reveal itself through the actions of those who cannot see beyond immediate advantage. I haven't spoken Carr's name aloud since his departure, not from lingering resentment, but from a simple recognition that he no longer occupies meaningful space in the narrative I'm creating. I've heard he found a position with a smaller firm across town, a lateral move at best, a significant step down at worst. This information arrived without my seeking it, and I received it without any particular emotional response. His story continues elsewhere, shaped by whatever lessons he may or may not have drawn from our brief intersection. My focus remains on building relationships that create genuine value, on mentoring team members who demonstrate commitment rather than merely ambition, on maintaining the balance between professional excellence and personal presence that allows me to be fully engaged with Jake's high school graduation this spring and his sister's dance recitals throughout the year. The next company contest has already been announced. Different structure, different prize, same opportunity to demonstrate sustained excellence rather than sporadic brilliance. I may enter or I may not. The compulsion to prove something has been replaced by the freedom to choose engagement based on genuine interest rather than reactive need. The corner office carries responsibilities that deserve my full attention. The relationships with clients like Whitaker require regular nurturing to remain productive for all involved. These priorities guide my professional decisions now, while evenings and weekends belong increasingly to the family connections I had allowed to weaken during years of misaligned priorities. Some victories open doors to greater challenges. Others simply confirm that you're already moving in the right direction. When I look back at the man who stood in Carr's office that Friday afternoon, calm on the surface while processing profound disappointment, I recognize both continuity and transformation. The same core qualities remain: patience, persistence, professionalism, perspective. What's changed is the context in which these qualities operate and the confidence with which they're expressed. No longer accommodating my own diminishment to maintain institutional stability. No longer accepting recognition only when it's mistakenly directed elsewhere and needs correction. No longer placing professional validation above personal fulfillment in some misguided hierarchy of success. The same fundamental character now exists in an environment that values precisely what I bring, creating alignment that transforms work from obligation to opportunity, from endurance to engagement. There will be other disappointments, other moments when the recognition I've earned might be delayed or diverted. There will be other individuals who mistake quiet competence for exploitable weakness. The difference now is in how I position myself relative to these challenges. Not as someone hoping to be noticed, but as someone whose value is self-evident through consistent results and authentic relationships. Not as someone who needs institutional validation, but as someone who brings validated excellence to the institutions fortunate enough to secure my commitment. This shift represents neither arrogance nor entitlement, but rather the healthy self-assessment that allows genuine contribution without self-diminishment. Some transformations happen not through dramatic reinvention, but through subtle recalibration of how existing strengths are perceived and presented. As winter transitions again to spring, I sometimes find myself thinking about those three words, enjoy the game, and the different meanings they've accumulated over time. What began as the quiet response of someone accepting disappointment has evolved into something resembling a personal philosophy. Enjoy the game. Not just the scheduled entertainment on a particular Sunday, but the larger game of professional advancement and institutional politics. Enjoy it not through aggressive competition or strategic manipulation, but through masterful performance that makes its own case without requiring elaborate defense or explanation. Enjoy it by recognizing which prizes actually matter and which are merely symbols whose pursuit might distract from more meaningful objectives. Enjoy it by maintaining perspective on where career achievements rank within the broader spectrum of a well-lived life. Last weekend, Jake asked about my experience during those weeks when everything changed, curious about the internal mechanisms of corporate justice from the perspective of his own emerging adulthood. I shared the outlines without embellishment, the disappointment, the patience, the natural unfolding of consequences beyond my control. But weren't you angry? He pressed, seeking the emotional drama that seemed proportionate to the situation. I considered the question carefully, wanting to offer something more nuanced than the easy absolutes that separate television narratives from lived experience. Disappointment isn't the same as anger, I finally replied. Disappointment acknowledges that something valuable was lost. Anger demands that someone pay for the loss. I chose to focus on what could be gained rather than what had been taken. He nodded slowly, processing this distinction with a thoughtful attention that makes conversations with him increasingly rewarding as he matures. The lesson I hope he carries forward isn't about passive acceptance of mistreatment or injustice. It's about the strategic wisdom of choosing your responses based on desired outcomes rather than emotional impulses. It's about recognizing when stepping back creates space for natural consequences that accomplish more than direct confrontation ever could. It's about understanding that true power often lies not in what you actively do, but in what you consciously refrain from doing. The support withdrawn, the intervention withheld, the rescue not performed. These choices require more discipline than dramatic confrontation, but ultimately create more sustainable results. They allow systems to reveal their own structural weaknesses without your fingerprints on the collapse. They preserve your energy for building something better rather than dismantling what isn't working. As another Super Bowl approaches, this one viewed from home, with no personal stake in the outcome, I find myself at peace with the complex interplay of loss and gain that has characterized these past 15 months. The tickets Carr stole created the conditions for the position I now hold. The relationship he attempted to appropriate revealed its true foundation when tested. The system that initially failed to recognize my contribution ultimately corrected itself without requiring my active intervention. There's a certain elegance to this resolution that any more direct approach would have compromised, a clean alignment of action and consequence that allows forward movement without lingering resentment or unresolved conflict. Some stories find their most satisfying conclusion not in explosive climax, but in the quiet affirmation that balance has been restored through the natural mechanics of integrity. I keep the framed contest announcement on my wall, not as a trophy of vindication, but as a reminder of how unexpected paths can lead to necessary destinations. The theft of those tickets didn't just correct a specific injustice. It catalyzed a comprehensive reevaluation of how I define professional success and personal fulfillment. It transformed my relationship with the institution where I've invested 16 years of my professional life. It clarified which aspects of recognition actually matter and which are merely symbolic substitutes for deeper validation. These realizations have value beyond the specific circumstances that triggered them, creating a template for responding to future challenges with the same measured patience and strategic restraint. Some lessons serve not just the immediate situation, but all similar situations that might follow, establishing patterns of response that become increasingly refined through implementation. When new employees join my team, they sometimes ask about the story behind a framed email, curious about why such an apparently minor document merits display among professional certifications and client acknowledgments. I share the narrative without embellishment or dramatic emphasis, presenting it as neither cautionary tale nor triumph of justice, but simply as one example of how institutional systems eventually align with demonstrated value, even when temporary disruptions occur. Their reactions vary from indignation on my behalf to admiration for the restraint shown, but the most thoughtful responses recognize the universal application beyond my specific experience. We all face moments when our contribution is overlooked or our earned recognition is redirected elsewhere. How we respond to these moments reveals more about our character and strategic thinking than any planned presentation or polished performance ever could. Spring has returned to the bay, sunlight now dancing across water that moves with tidal certainty, advancing and receding according to forces larger than any momentary disruption. From my office window, I can track the gradual lengthening of days, the subtle shift in light quality that signals renewal beyond mere repetition. 15 months since those stolen tickets created space for unexpected growth. 16 years with a company that eventually recognized what was always present beneath the surface of daily performance. A career built on substance rather than spectacle, on consistent delivery rather than strategic visibility. A life increasingly balanced between professional contribution and personal presence. These elements form not a perfect resolution, but an evolving equilibrium, subject to future challenges, but grounded in clearer understanding of what actually matters and which games are truly worth playing, let alone winning. Some journeys circle back to familiar territory, while revealing it as somewhere you've never actually been before. Transformed not by external change, but by internal recalibration of how you perceive and engage with what has always been there. Last night, as I helped Jake with his college applications, I found myself reflecting on the strange, circular path that brought us to this moment of shared purpose and mutual respect. He asked about my greatest professional achievement, a standard prompt on one of the essays he was drafting. I considered mentioning the Meridian System's expansion or the divisional restructuring that had positioned our team for sustainable growth. Instead, I told him about a quiet Friday afternoon when I walked away from stolen recognition with nothing but 3 words and my dignity intact. "But that doesn't sound like an achievement," he said, confusion evident in his expression. "It sounds like you lost something." I smiled, recognizing in his response the same perspective I might have held before everything changed. "Sometimes," I explained, "the achievement isn't in what you gain, but in how you respond to what's taken. Sometimes dignity preserved is worth more than recognition received." He nodded slowly, the contemplative gesture of a young man encountering an idea worth examining rather than immediately accepting or rejecting. We returned to his applications, discussing future possibilities with the comfortable rhythm we've developed these past months. Whatever college eventually welcomes him, whatever career path ultimately claims his talents, I hope he carries forward this understanding. That true character reveals itself not in victories easily won, but in disappointments gracefully navigated. That sometimes the most powerful move in any game is simply refusing to play by corrupted rules, choosing instead to create space for natural consequences to unfold. That patience isn't merely the passive acceptance of delayed gratification, but an active practice of strategic restraint that allows deeper patterns to emerge without interference. Tomorrow brings the annual leadership retreat, where I'll present our division's vision for the coming fiscal year. The projections are solid, the strategy sound, the team aligned in purpose if occasionally divergent in approach. I've prepared thoroughly without anxious over-preparation, confident in both the content and my ability to communicate it effectively. Patricia's introductory email described me as the quiet cornerstone of our client relationships, language that acknowledges strength without requiring volume, stability without suggesting stagnation. This description feels right in ways that would have seemed inadequate before, recognition that values precisely what I bring rather than what I've never pretended to be. There's profound satisfaction in this alignment between internal identity and external perception, between how I understand my contribution and how others experience its impact. The framework of my life has expanded in ways I couldn't have anticipated when standing in Carr's office that Friday afternoon, hearing that my tickets had been reassigned. Not just professionally, though the promotion and autonomy have certainly transformed my daily experience of work. The more significant expansion has been in perspective, the broader view that allows me to see setbacks as potential catalysts, disappointments as necessary redirections, and patience as a form of power rather than powerlessness. Some wisdom arrives only through lived experience, through the embodied understanding that comes from navigating difficulty with integrity intact. These lessons cannot be taught through abstract principle or cautionary tale. They must be earned through conscious presence in moments that test our deepest values and most ingrained responses. As the coastal fog gives way to spring clarity, I find myself looking forward with quiet anticipation rather than backward with lingering resentment. The past informs, but doesn't define this forward movement, providing context without determining direction. Whatever challenges await in the months and years ahead, I carry forward not just the professional recognition that eventually followed those stolen tickets, but the deeper recognition of my own capacity to respond with strategic patience rather than reactive impulse. To distinguish between disappointments that merit intervention and those best allowed to reveal their own inherent flaws through natural consequence. To build success on authentic foundation rather than careful impression management. These capacities represent not just professional assets, but life skills that transcend any specific context or challenge. creating a template for responding to future disappointments with the same measured restraint that transformed this particular experience from simple loss to unexpected gain.